Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ventures. I'm excited about today's episode with Foxy Davison. She's an amazing entrepreneur, and so we have a lot to learn. I'm excited to share this with you. But first, a few words about our sponsors that make this show possible. As a full disclosure, I am an operator investor in these companies. Number one, BirdBuddy. BirdBuddy, if you go to mybirdbuddy.com, there's a couple days left in the Kickstarter. They've raised now over $4.3 million. And BirdBuddy is a smart bird feeder. It uses AI to auto-detect the birds that are visiting you in your yard. And you can have a collection and a live feed to be able to learn more about your feathered friends that are visiting you. Number two, Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to walk through different entrepreneurial frameworks so that you and your team and your advisors and your investors can be on the same page around the status of your company, but also so that you can learn about the things that maybe you don't necessarily know very much about, like how to architect your data for marketing purposes, how to build a financial model, and things like that. And finally, number three, Satchel. If you go to satchel.works, it is a streamlined, simplified communications platform so that you can publish content and communicate directly via very simple newsletter interface to send emails directly to your audience. And it allows also your audience to subscribe to different topics that you publish so that you can be as multidisciplinary and write about as many different things as you want without the risk of potentially losing some of your audience members. So if you are watching this episode, you can also listen anywhere that you get your podcasts. You can just search for Ventures. And if you're listening, you can also watch by visiting wclittle.com, and there we'll have more extensive show notes to the things that we talk about today. So with that, please enjoy this conversation with Foxy Davison. All right, Foxy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Really, really glad to have you with us to share your journey with us. Would you mind just starting out by sharing a little bit about your background and your journey thus far?
Yeah, that's a big question. My name is Foxy Davison, and originally from Tacoma. Moved up to Seattle to go to the U. I don't know how many years. In '98, I think we moved up here. I say we because my husband and I met in elementary school, ended up going to the same college, and then finally getting married. So he's always a part of a we for a long time. But yeah, after that, moved to St. Louis for a period of time and came back here and now live in West Seattle doing all sorts of kinds of work.
So the people listening, the people watching are usually various flavors of entrepreneurs or investors really interested in the kind of the venture building process or the entrepreneurial process. And I've always admired the work that you do, a variety of different work around the communities that you've been involved with. So how, in your particular story, where did you begin to realize that you had this entrepreneurial drive in you?
That's a good question. You know, it's funny. I'm now sitting in a place where I'm becoming more reflective on how I got to where I'm at today. And I have to give credit to those who came before me. I grew up, even though in Tacoma there wasn't a strong, well, there was, in my world, it felt like there was a ton of Black folks, okay, all around. But I realize now that was because the way in which my family just so happened to do what they did in community kept us kind of in a little bubble. And in my family, we had entrepreneurs always. My grandfather and grandmother were pastors and really had a heart for community. And so they started preaching in the prisons. And from that ministry went on to develop a work release that is still in Tacoma to this day, and ended up from that. Now there are 3 work release programs, and I have such respect for my grandparents. My grandmother is now passed. My grandpa is still here. And I remember years ago just talking with him about what that was like, and him sharing stories about how the state wanted to take it over and didn't feel like he could do it, and he did it, and they did it together, right? And that institution is still here. Well, fast forward to when I came on, I mean, when I was a kid, my mom worked there from 16 on. She's now the CEO of this company. She worked there. And so we would go and have to clean the offices as a kid in the work release. Never knew what a work release was, by the way. We would just go and clean the offices, and we would go to church. And then my grandparents ended up owning a senior. They had a passion for the community. They had a passion for people in the margins. And so after the work release, they established a camp, and still going to this day, take 100 kids to camp every year. Kids who probably couldn't afford to go to camp. It's never been more than $100 to go for 7 days, great food.
Mm.
And then they built a senior apartment complex. And so they just had this passion for people, and went out in community and made it work, worked with the city, worked with other folks. And so I am now understanding the richness of that, right?
Mm.
And the beauty of that, and the privilege we had to grow up within a family dynamic. Now, I say that my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother married while my grandpa was raising 6 kids on his own, and my grandmother had 8. And so when they married, they had 14 kids, and they were pushing through. Like, you would think they would be poor, right? That's a lot of kids.
Mm.
Now, mind you, some of them were old enough to be on their own by the time they married, but nonetheless,
Mm.
and then they just, were strong Christians and did the church thing. And so anyway, I just say that to say I was raised in a family that taught us, first of all, to love God, second, to love the community that you're in, to
Mm.
pay attention to the community that you're in, and that church and community are not as separate as we like to believe, right? The church's responsibility is to be in the community, and or outside of the church, your responsibility. That's what they told us. Whether you go to church or not, you need to pay attention to the community and what the needs are and how you can be a part of the community. And then and that led to entrepreneurship. And so, not that I've always been this person that's like, oh, I want to be my own boss. Sometimes people think that when they think entrepreneurship, right? I didn't really care. I wanted to be a teacher,
Uh,
and that's what I wanted to be. I just wanted to be a teacher. I knew that at a young age, and yeah, that wasn't about being my own boss, but in some ways, being a teacher is your own boss in your own classroom. So that I can see that now. But yeah, that's really where it came from. Is my rich upbringing. Yeah.
I love that. And so in terms of paying attention to your community, so up through school, through college, what kind of where in the act of paying attention to community did you first start those initiatives of diving into kind of start your own things up or partner with other organizations as you sort of went into adulthood there?
Yeah. In high school, I got into music. I like music, and I got into a band, which was really honestly my first exposure to multicultural living.
Hmm.
Before then, honestly, even though I went to a school that was predominantly white, my church was all black. And so my world was not multicultural. I just went to school. I didn't play with I didn't have like long lasting friendships at school. And it wasn't that it was bad. It was just that we didn't, even though we were integrated schools, it didn't feel like I would go to someone's house. And then in high school, I got into this band, and it was a multicultural band. It was all sorts of folks. And from that lens, it allowed me the opportunity to get to travel a bit. We traveled all over the state, and then we began to travel. We went to Africa. We went to Uganda for a while, and that exposed me to, there's more people than I think that I get to have relationship with, right? And that excited me. That it kind of expanded my heart, my ability to see beyond my
Mm.
own culture. And then so into college, is when I really started clarifying I wanted to teach. And so what I did was started tutoring in I'm trying to think, in Aki Karos. We started tutoring a lot in the CD, just going to schools and tutoring through a program at the UW called Gear Up. And that again was just like getting in community. Just, I
Mm.
mean, the beauty of being in a school building is you get to see all sorts of things. You get to know what's the pulse of the community. I didn't think that then. I was just graduated from high school, and you don't think that way. But now looking back, I can see that started to clarify where I could hear community, right? And then in college, I don't know, I did honestly, I did all sorts of things at the at the U. I was an ambassador. I did orientation and started doing those things, stayed there to go to grad school in teaching. And then after coming out, I went back to the CD and started teaching elementary school, fourth grade. Yeah, at TT Minor. I love that building. I love that school. It was such a beautiful school, and that really, again, being in the school setting really helps you talk to parents. You hear about the businesses around you. You really get a sense of what's happening in community.
Yeah, I think I remember our paths crossing multiple times in college, and then in the CD. Which, for those who aren't familiar, that's the Central District in Seattle, Washington. There, and I remember going around and doing a walk for awareness and fundraising for sickle cell anemia and those afflicted by that. Can you maybe just talk a little bit about kind of how your involvement in that community as another aspect of the way that you're kind of listening, as well as getting your friends and neighbors involved?
Yeah. So fast forward, we moved to St. Louis. We come back here, and by that time we had two children, one of which had sickle cell. We knew nothing about sickle cell, but we knew that we were supposed to go to Odessa Brown, which was it was also in the Central District, and that was where the sickle cell department is housed to still. While I was there, I was offered a job randomly. It was like, hey, we have actually a sickle cell community. Would you be interested in joining us as a community coordinator? And I was like, no, because I didn't really want to at the time. If you're raising children with if chronic illness is a part of your lives, that moment where you don't really want to, jump in the pool. You don't. You're just like, oh, I'm still kind of distancing myself from this reality. But I realized I had to because when the doctors here, I had called. We actually did the things we were supposed to do in regards to sickle cell, which was do the genetic testing. But the doctor here told me that I could have kids. And I remember calling him when my son was born and asking, wait a minute, wait, you told me we would be fine. And he said he was sorry, and how he did not know that the trait that I carry could actually connect with Jason's trait and have a baby that has sickle cell disease. That's the moment I realized I have to get involved,
Hmm.
because there's education that needs to be pushed out here. Families should not be coming and trying to get information, being told that this information is accurate, and then later being told that it wasn't. So I knew I had to. I didn't know then, but I said yes, knowing now that I had to say yes to that. And since then, I've been doing community coordinator work for the task force. I don't know, for maybe 11 years now, in communities. So we do walks every year, but more so than anything, we just are a support to people who have sickle cell kiddos. We engage with the doctors, we engage with community around sickle cell. So that's one of the jobs that I still am holding. And this is probably the longest job actually I've held.
So let's back up. Your fourth grade teacher in TT Minor in the Central District in Seattle there. What lessons did you learn, continuing this theme of listening? What lessons did you learn about the Central District community in that time?
Wow. Yeah. First of all, it was just a different place.
Mm.
It really was. It has changed so quickly through gentrification there.
Mm.
Um, because you got to remember, I was there during my college years and then came back. And graduated and stayed. TT Minor was this beautiful school that had a rich um, African American culture to it. The principal was an African American. And one of the things, just a very simple thing she did, we would always have a Monday morning assembly. And in that assembly, because she knew her children, she knew that kids got their hair did on Saturdays, right? And so part of the assembly was she adapted. She said, you know what? If you got your hair done on this weekend and you want to show it off, this is the time. And so she would have the kids walk through the assembly with their hair done. Now, I'm sure some kids probably felt sad because they couldn't get their hair done on Saturday. But it was just one of these things to celebrate. You know, we had songs, we sang songs. And the teachers that I got to work with, I didn't stay there that long. It was a year, and then we moved to St. Louis. But um, it was this opportunity. I think what I learned was, first of all, that the CD was a really important place
Mm,
for people.
mm.
It was where it was communal, and that the way in which we taught was communal. You know, like I remember working with the fifth grade, two Black male teachers in fifth grade. You don't see that very often. And we would exchange children based off the subject that you felt like you wanted to teach, you know, and we worked together in a different way. Now I'm not saying that didn't happen in other places that I taught. I taught in St. Louis too, but there was such a richness there. And this sense of community became alive, and I think for me that helped me to, when I came back to Seattle, just appreciate that so much more.
That's amazing. So St. Louis, how long were you there, and what kind of things were you up to in that community? And I imagine the sort of the
Yeah.
expansion of the horizons there, and the comparison between Seattle and St. Louis was
Yeah.
pretty interesting. Yeah, what were you up to there?
So I'll just say, when I moved to St. Louis, I did not want to go. I cried. I cried. I remember crying because Jason, we went, I think, a year or two before to visit the campus. My husband was going to go to seminary school, and I cried then because I knew we had to go. Right?
Mm,
It's that moment where you just know, oh no, I'm going to be back here. And it wasn't that St. Louis was a problem. It was that St. Louis was different. And
mm,
I'm not, I mean, I have cried through every change of my life. Okay. I cried at high school, and I remember Jason even asking, were you sad? Like, no, it wasn't that I was sad. I just knew things were changing.
mm,
Right. And so coming to St. Louis, it took me 2 years to even think about community,
mm.
right? To even settle in. We moved there, and I did start teaching. I taught fifth grade there. And again, that teaching allowed me to gain friendships, to get a sense of the community, to start and enjoy St. Louis because I got to know families. But it took me a while. But while I was there, I taught most of that time, and then then I had Judah. I had my first kiddo, and then 16 months later had the second. And so after that, I paused from full-time work and went on to work for a nonprofit that was helping kids after school tutoring. Yeah.
So then back to Seattle, and did you
Yeah.
move back to the Central District? And so obviously you raising a family, paying attention to what's going on. Where did your journey take you there?
Yeah. So when we came back, I started working with the task force, the sickle cell group. Um, and then I think we stumbled across you again, Will. Jason and then you started talking more, and eventually
Yeah, we were
we did take
neighbors.
over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So then, you know what I did? And this is partly Jason, um, who is also very, very communal. He started working in community through HIDMO, and I was doing the task force at Odessa Brown. So we were in like a 10-block radius. Everything we did was in this CD radius, right? And then I met this. I heard about this pastor who's doing farming, and of all things. And I remember being intrigued, and Jason saying, go check it out, go see what they're up to. And our motto was just kind of, if you see something of interest and you see something that maybe you could help out with, just go see what it's about, right? And so I ended up going down there and talking to Reverend Jeffrey through Clean Greens. And I swear I stayed there. I don't know how long I stayed, for a couple years, and ended up, I felt like doing like 20 hours of work volunteering to just support this amazing. I thought it was so cool to have, first of all, a black farm. The farmer, Mr. Tommy, was phenomenal, and he's from New Orleans. And so I just loved his passion for the earth and for growing food organically. I don't know nothing about food. Okay. I don't know nothing about growing nothing. Okay. But it was the passion, and it was what they really needed support with at the time was organizing, administration stuff. And I was like, oh, I can do that. So I stayed there for a few years. So between working the task force and really working at Clean Greens for multiple years, and I loved it, loved every bit of it. Yeah.
And in a
And then
nutshell, yeah.
I was side gigging for my family's business. Every now and again, my mom would call and be like, "We need these policies and procedures written up." And I'm like, "Okay, I got you." And so we would write those up on the side. I've always been working for them on the side level, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a nutshell, what was or still is hopefully the mission of Clean Greens? What were they up to?
Clean Greens, they're still here. Yeah. And their mission was simply to bring fresh organic food to the Central District
Hmm.
and making sure that people, all people had access to quality food. And that it was just that simple. So they had marketplaces, and of course they wanted to provide um, jobs for
Hmm.
folks. And yeah, so they're still here today. They have, I know that in my opinion, they went up. It was just ups and downs. But one thing about Reverend Jeffrey and Miss Lottie, who is now passed, um, they stayed the course. I mean, if you want to learn about perseverance and resilience, you can go look into Clean Greens because they're still making it work. Yeah. It's an amazing organization. And again, it was just, I mean, really at first it was greens, just getting some fresh collard greens, but now, they produce all sorts of food. Yeah.
So in those 7, 8 years that we were neighbors in the Central District, that community went through a profound, and is still going through a profound amount of change. What aspects of that change do you think were good, and what aspects do you think were, could have gone better, or were not so good?
Yeah. Mm. It's I think in some ways, sadly, when certain people are in community, it gets more attention. Certain things, opportunities, and yeah, I would say that opportunities and different businesses and all those things are not bad. And I think that the Central District began to get more attention on a maybe on a larger scale when different folks moved into the area. Whether that's attention, with crime, or that's attention with opportunities in business. I mean, the spectrum is what it is, but I do think that more attention was given as more different kinds of people moved into the area. Um, the sad part is to me around belonging.
Mm,
If I could say one word, is who feels like they belong there.
mm,
And I never forget being in a forum, and this man stood up and said, "I have lived here, my grandparents have lived here, this has always been home. And now when I walk down the streets, I feel like I don't belong here anymore
mm,
because people cross the street when they see me, or they don't say hello anymore."
mm.
And so that to me, I had the sense that the city felt like a home and a safe place. And then it just changed because gentrification, capitalism, whatever, opportunities arose, people moved out, and now it just feels like it doesn't have a pulse like it used to have. And I'm not sure, most people I talk to who were there before just feel like that's over.
Mm,
That time of CD is over. So yeah.
mm. So then, in terms of the many hats that you're wearing, then the many jobs over the last decade or two, where fast forward in the chronology here. So you you were working with Clean Greens in the community. Kind of where did the path take you from there?
Yeah, it really took us to Cortona.
Mm,
After Clean Greens, we really started focusing in on Cortona. Again, it's one of those things where, like Clean Greens, I don't know much about farming. I don't know nothing about coffee. I don't even drink coffee. Okay, I drink tea. Uh, but what Jason and I knew was is we wanted to always cultivate spaces where people could come together
mm,
and people from different places and times, but just being able to have a place. And so Cortona, we really got into excited about with just creating opportunities for the work we already did, but coming under a cafe.
mm,
Um, and so that was interesting. That was fun. Yeah, we then what happened was so we started doing work in Cortona. We started allowing community members to use the upstairs to rent out for events. We would host our own events with the. So I already did work with the task force. So we started doing game nights once a month in the cafe. That was great. We did chicken and waffle nights, and invited kids out. We did movie nights. And then there was just like serious community events that where people just needed to discuss things and talk. I remember us having a Black Parents Night and people just talking through homeschooling, but through the lens of what does homeschooling look like as an African American parent, right? And that was just I just remember that night and just being like, oh, I'm so glad we had this space. Um, but then Trinity came, number 3. And when she came on board of our lives, she was unexpected. We knew at that time we couldn't keep up with all the tasks
mm.
and so we actually invited my sister, Ice, who was living in St. Louis at the time, to come and help manage. Now, she did know coffee because she was working at a coffee shop before then. And so she came, and we decided over time that Cortona needed to become her baby.
Mm.
And so she really started taking over, has done a tremendous job. Just now is closing Cortona officially. Um, but she did an amazing job and it became her baby, and she had her own way of doing it and we just kind of let her have it. I mean, I think we kind of hoped that we could still sneak in there, but life doesn't always allow for you to do everything you want to do. So it was obvious. I remember Jason at one point going, okay, Foxy, we need to go ahead and just let Ice have it. And I was like, no, I want to just keep a little bit. But he's like, no. And it was the right choice. And Iceland needed to take that over, she's done an amazing job. So yeah, that was our next kind of baby for a while. Yeah.
Hmm. So then now, okay, the number of balls that you're juggling as a human being starts increasing. All right, you still got these multiple
Yeah.
hats, multiple jobs that you're wearing, and I think what I've always admired, and I think is a lesson for all the entrepreneurs listening in, is we have a tendency to kind of have our idea about what a community needs, right? So some kind of market, whether it's a local or a global, and we tend to stop listening at some point, and we tend to just try to bring that product or service to market and lose the art of listening. So for you, then you're running the coffee shop, growing family, continue to listen. Where does the story take up from there?
Yeah. So, I ended up stopping with Clean Greens over time. And that partly was because I'm trying to think, the task force became more, I had to focus in to support that organization because that was like running into, oh, we have to fundraise. Like there's 4 people on this board, right? And so it's just like, and everyone else worked at the time or could not offer as much time. So I ended up learning so much. I mean, this was like walking into an organization and then learning like, oh, we have to fundraise, bookkeeping, accounting. Like I didn't know any of these things, but I started to just learn them because I understood that we had work to do. Um, and then my family's businesses all of a sudden was just like, hey, with the work release, it started with the work release, and it was like,
Mhm.
hey, now we have an opportunity to grow from 1 work release to 3.
Mm.
And in order to do that, we had to write And I remember, I'll never forget my aunt who's just an amazing woman, also very much communal. She just lived communal in Tacoma. And I remember Auntie she was really sick. And my other aunt, my mother and I were all in the hospital, um, while she had cancer, and we're literally in there typing up. I never forget my other aunt, who's just a will. I mean, she's just an amazing woman, and she's just typing away at this grant or this proposal to get these other two facilities, right? And my aunt, who was sick at the time, was just laughing at us. She was like, "You guys are for real," and my auntie's just like, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." Well, fast forward, the next day, my aunt passed.
Mm,
And then that Monday, we found out we got the two facilities.
mm.
And once that happened, it was like, oh shoot, we got work to do. So like the task force, I came on as the VP of Client and Community Services. And my real passion was to see community connect with the work release and the work release to connect with community. So the way that the work release works is, you get a certain amount of funding, but that funding is not necessarily for programming, for actual activities with your residents. And so I just had this passion. Like I was just like, I know so many people in community who would love to help, who would love to come into this space and offer their services and expertise. You know, let's find Amazonians and get them to start learning to program. I remember I was trying that for a while. So my brain tries all sorts of things, if you haven't noticed, right? So, you know, we were doing, I had this one lady I had met who always was an amazing designer. Like she just could make your room look absolutely stunning. And I was like, come to the work release and for Thanksgiving, just like deck it out. And she did. It was phenomenal. And I remember the women. So the one we own in Seattle is an all women's facility. And I remember the women crying when they came into that room and just seeing how beautiful this lady had made it. I don't know how that worked, right? I don't know why I met her, but it's just like these connections that happen. So I realized that my person who I am is also just being a bridge, you know, a connector, and being able to see, oh, I know so and so over here. And if you met this person, maybe there could be something we could do together. And my aunt to this day says, like, I don't know how you know all these people. And I'm like, I don't know either. But I do know that so and so probably you might want to talk to them because they can, you know, and that maybe is just from the years of being in community. And like you said, just trying to listen in to
Mm,
who people are. And sometimes people don't know what they need, right? You
mm,
can go sit down right now and ask people, well, what do you need in community? That's actually a very big question.
mm,
That's honestly hard to address
mm,
sometimes, right? So I think it's just part of being in community and also just entrusting that maybe you have some things that you could offer. And offering is not a problem, right? Like you offer it out to community, you see if it works. And let me tell you, not every single idea that I've ever had has not came out at all. You know what I mean? Even though I try to listen in and I think I know, I still don't know. I have to try these things out and see, you know. So there's been some programs that we've tried to put into the work release that just nobody signed up for.
mm,
And so I got to go, okay, well, we got to move that off the shelf. It's not personal. And you know, so now if I say now I still work with the community there. I've really been focused in on the women's. I don't know why the women's one for me has been a place. I just want to see more activities happening there. So right now through another grant we're doing parenting classes once a week. We're teaching some mindfulness, which is another job that now I've gotten into that's been really helpful. And so we're going to start this really small cohort to help women who are coming out of prison. And we do all sorts of things. There's an art class that we're trying to kick up. So that's part of the work now is definitely working in the work release. And I really enjoy that. On top of that, my grandparents, remember they own this senior building, and they said to me, my mom is the orchestrator of all these things, right? And she goes, okay, I need you to go start working and helping at the senior building. I'm like, what? And she's like, yeah, because the manager had left and they just needed some help, and the ownership, she wanted ownership to come back in. So I was like, okay. So here I am. I love seniors. I really do. Um, and so I was like, okay, so I'm figuring out, this is a HUD building, and I'm figuring out all the rules for HUD and now manage that twice a week. Um, and it's not about the paperwork part for me. It is a lot of paperwork. That's the part I don't really love. But I love getting to hear
Mm,
seniors. I
mm,
love getting to laugh with them. I tell people all the time, this is an absolute reality show that is waiting to happen. Is
mm.
the senior in is living in a 23 building, 23 units of seniors. Oh, it is. They are just phenomenal and hilarious, right? And I get to just kind of hear. I mean, even with COVID, and when COVID happened, just thinking about what that means for a senior,
Mm,
I wouldn't have known without being in this building. But just knowing, I think all the work that I've done has helped me to know what it can potentially feel like to be isolated
mm.
on these margins of community, right? With sickle cell, because you can't always, your body doesn't allow you to do what you wish it would, right? So you see young people who have to go on disability and can't necessarily feel like, they have a hard time knowing, like, what's my dream? What am I supposed to be doing? Right? Like, um, and just seeing them live on the margins of life. And then now having this opportunity with seniors to kind of see the same reality for various reasons. And I don't know sometimes why. I'm still trying to figure out always why I'm in these spaces, but I certainly feel like it's a privilege to get to listen in to people who might just be different, who have to live a different lifestyle. So
That's incredible. So for people not familiar with the work release world, what is that world? Help us understand that kind of community and that kind of work for those that aren't familiar.
yeah, so a work release is really an opportunity for those who are incarcerated to come out a bit early and live still in some form of confinement, but get to start work. And the work release guarantees that they have housing, because I'll say it this way: when my grandfather started years ago, and this has been 50 something years, the reason he started is because he was challenged by one of the residents in prison and at McNeil, and he said, "You know what, Brown? That's what they call him. Um, we yeah, thank you for coming to help us in here. The problem is when we get out, they
Mm,
couldn't get housing. The discrimination against housing was incredible. And then what kind of job do they get?" Right. And so the work release is kind of a transition space where, okay, we'll provide you with housing, we provide you with meals, all your meals. And we have kind of some contracts with certain employers who are open to having those who have been formerly incarcerated to work for them. And we just kind of help transition them into being back in community. Um, I feel like I have learned so much by being in this community. Once again, one of these spaces again where people are living on the margins, right? Feeling like I don't feel like I can be in community fully because I have this record and I have this burden that I have to carry. Um, but then also, I've right now we with the parenting program, I'm not teaching this. Here's what I've started to realize. Um, it's this idea of coming up under different kinds of leadership, right? So I'm not teaching the parenting classes partly because I've not been incarcerated. Now I support people who are teaching them, and what we purposely did for the parenting class is hire those who have been formerly incarcerated who are now living their lives, right? And so for me, I think even in my teaching, even with my kids, even with the seniors, is trying to support them becoming their own. And not that, I don't want to say it like I'm doing anything to make them leaders. I'm just recognizing leadership and coming in with my own support to say, how do I help to support you? So, and I say that because I remember when the parenting, I started helping with one of the parenting classes, and my brain is an ideas brain. So after the parenting class, I'm meeting with the facilitators. I'm like, we should do this, this, and that. And then it dawned on me, I'm not supposed to be here. This
mm,
is not supposed to be what I do for this project. I'm supposed to support these amazing people who have their own expertise to do this project well. And so what I had to do, what I've learned from this last project is step back and
mm.
to to stand, to come up under, to support these amazing, brilliant people, and just telling me what they need. Making sure they have funding to continue the work is the hardest part I got to do. But I don't need to be like deciding what they do from session to session. I
Mm.
thought I did, but I don't. Yeah. So I'm learning that. That's part of the learning right now.
That's powerful
Which
because
is
that's us entrepreneurs. That's our hardest thing is knowing when to say no, when to step away. That aha moment for you, I think, was it sounds like pretty powerful, and I think a good lesson for the rest of. So just to hark on that just a little bit for those that might be struggling right now with the no, when to say no and when to step away. What advice would you have for the people chasing after all these shiny objects and getting themselves overloaded with lots of different things in order to discern that the way that you did there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not going to suggest that I have the full answer to that. But I would say, because I think it's unfolding for me as well. Um, I what I have found to be really, really helpful is stepping back, is really having a practice of stepping back and looking at where you are and
Mm,
where you want to be,
mm,
and also evaluating leadership and seeing it, and asking yourself, how do I support someone's growth without telling them what to do? Like, it's not,
mm,
that doesn't, it's stepping back enough to see the gifts in people, and then asking, how do I support that but not take over? I don't like the takeover spirit type of way of living. So recognizing, am I doing more of the work? Are people really, or do people have the bandwidth, the know-how, the opportunity to really lay their gifts at this table? And then how do we mix them and work on them together? Now, I would imagine that there are times where you have to kind of, be in there and say, no, we got to do this. You know what I mean? But there's other times where that's not where your leadership is. Your
mm,
leadership is being still and building what sometimes they say, building the container, like,
mhm, mhm,
hey, no, I had the opportunity this week to say, okay, this fund will be here for the whole year. So whatever you guys want to do, you got the year, and you can rock it for a year. Now, sadly, where I hope to go is like, you got this for 10 years. You know what I'm saying? For sustainability's sake. But right now we got a fund. We made sure that was secure. So now you guys go for it. But I still stay close enough to know, um, if there's a need that comes up, and not just a need in like, hey, we need some materials, but hey, we need some training, we need some more expertise. That's my job now.
mm.
But I don't know how I think the best way to do that is to have a consistent practice, which nobody wants to practice, at least not in my world. I don't want to practice nothing, but having a consistent practice to step back,
Mm.
and keep asking yourself, am I in too many projects? I know I'm right now in too many projects, but I don't know how to get out of any of them. I don't, and maybe it's not that I'm in too many. It's just that the role that I'm playing, you know, changes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Something
So,
you said
yeah.
earlier, which I thought was super intriguing, your work in the work release world, where you're brainstorming ideas for different programs, and then you're testing those ideas, see who signs up for them. Maybe share a story of the one that you mentioned that didn't work. How did you
Oh,
come up with the idea? Who are the people that helped formulate it? How did
yeah.
you how did you spread the word about it? And then at what point did you realize it wasn't working and you needed to you needed to shut it down?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, in this one that we're doing right now with the parenting classes, um, we wanted to expand it to the all three facilities.
Mm,
And trying to get these other facilities on board has been so hard. And then I remember, because I think it's cool. Like, who doesn't want? I mean, you're in work release, first of all, so the opportunity to do any kind of programming has normally been pretty interesting. And this is how we work as people who create ideas. It's like, who wouldn't want to come to this, right? And then so for in our world, we have to first get it through DOC to be approved,
mm,
and then we had to get it promoted by supervisors, facility monitors. They would promote. And I remember calling and saying, "Okay, we're ready to launch." And she goes, "Oh, well, no one signed up, for the class." And you're just like, "What?" But it's also realizing there's other priorities sometimes. COVID is a real reality right now in the work release. You got, you know, 40 to 90 people all living in the same space.
Mm.
So you also have to accept that sometimes what you want to do is not the priority. And so you got to let go. And I did have to let go. And what I've decided now is I'll ding them every now and again and see if it's a good time. If it's not, we're still doing this project in the one in Seattle, which has been fine. So, that's happened through the years where there'll be something that we've created or thought through and thought it was going to be this phenomenal idea, and then they're just like, nah. Where else does that happen in your life? Try it with your children. You know what I mean? You have this stunning, class, or hey guys, I signed us up for this, and then they look at you like they don't know you. They've the ones who have taught me how to survive after that moment where you realize your idea is not flying.
Mm.
I say that funny, like humorously, because I love humor. But honestly, there are lessons, and to all of those who do have children,
Mm.
there are so many entrepreneur lessons to learn within raising your children. You're a team. You're like a business in a way, right? And you're trying to cultivate, trying to lead, trying to push, and then yet they're their own humans. And if we pay attention enough, we can really learn some things through parenting more than I think we give credit to.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's too easy to get, put our head down and kind of get in our work or our hobbies or whatever, and just sort of ignore all of those lessons to be mined from raising kids. I think our kids are similar age. And I think as I've even interacted with your kids more recently, just very, very impressed by the autonomy and curiosity that they have. And I think it sounds like you all have been learning some serious lessons through
Yeah.
that process, which is amazing. So now you're West Seattle, focused on the sort of the greater Seattle area. What are your visions and plans now for the future? What sort of things are you passionate about, and things, entrepreneurial endeavors or otherwise, that you are hoping to see come about here in the short to medium future?
Yeah. So once again, my brain gets going and I have to slow down and know that everything I think can't happen this year. But we have been really, really blessed twice in buying homes. So
Mm.
we bought a home in the CD. We bought this home in the Central District because our neighbors told us, if we sell this home, we want to sell it to you. And we were like, what? And home ownership was not something that we just didn't think about. And so I remember when that happened, we figured it out. We figured out a way for them to basically, we bought the home, don't get it twisted, but we didn't have to put much down on it. I mean, we just worked it. They were committed to making sure that we could get this house. And so that house now is in the CD. The house is small, so we knew that we wouldn't probably live in it.
Mm.
So we Airbnb'd it for a while. We Airbnb'd the back room, was very easily, it could be an Airbnb. And the front, we were able to, through the Airbnb, offset the cost of the mortgage, so that we had two people always living in the front for a very discounted rate. And primarily we tried to make sure it was people who were active in community, tried to make sure it was people of color knew about it so that they could be there first.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did that for a few years. And then, running an Airbnb is no joke. It was great. I mean, we got Superhost many of times. And so I remember when we decided to stop in COVID, everyone was like, "Oh, we're so sad." And I was like, "No, no, no, this is not bad. Like the business is actually going great, but I'm tired. I'm tired of running Airbnb. You know, it requires it's a whole little hotel."
Hmm.
So we really hoped that maybe we could just rent it out to a family, and maybe we could work with churches, individuals to help offset the cost. And that's what happened. So
Mm-hmm.
right now we have a family living in that house. And we really wanted to say to especially people of color, look, you can still stay in the CD. I don't know how we're gonna do it, but we got this house. We can't live in it. Let's see. And so churches and individuals came around that and really honestly give once a month to support this family that some of them will never ever meet. Um, to make sure that we have a sustainable space. So that has been a great blessing. This has just started this past year. And then it happened again with this West Seattle house. We were renting this house and the owners just told us, "Hey, this has happened in the last few months. Hey, we got to sell their house." They wanted to sell before the change of presidents, I guess, this year. And we were like, "Okay, well, do we want to buy this house?" And there's a piece of us like, "No, because there's work to do on his house."
Sure.
But there was another piece who was like, "I don't feel like moving in COVID and in the winter, so I guess we buy it." And they worked with us again, similar to the first. We didn't have enough down payment. Um, and they worked with us. They
Mm.
worked with us and the lenders worked with us. And so now we own this home. So now what do we want to do? Honestly, one of our passions has been to continue. We are realizing that we suffer from trying to live so individual,
Mm.
and we need to come back to communal ways of living. And that's what we really want to do. This property has actually in Seattle, it still has a good amount of yard space, and we're not really yard people. I mean, I just want to have like a couple gardens, but I don't need a big yard. And so we've really been brainstorming. I think we have the idea, which is to build onto this house for two reasons. And one of those is we constantly meet people who need a place to stay.
Mm.
Um, and we just want to be able to offer it and say, "Hey, come live with us for a while." Whether that's because you're trying to save up for a house, whether that's because I have some young lady right now who just needs to probably not be in her house all the time with her family, like needs, we meet people who have all these different experiences, and I told people I'm communal to the point. We've always been a community, but at this point in my life, if you live with me, oh, I'm with you. But if you live like even 10 blocks away, it's so hard for me to stay communal,
Mm.
right? But I'm at a place where like I'm tired of cooking every meal. You know what I mean? Yeah, my kids cook meals, but wouldn't it be beautiful where you said, "Okay, I got, we got Mondays, and I got, I think our goal is to come back to this idea of being a villager.
Mm.
And how do we, even if it's, I think this property could allow for us to build so that at least one or two more folks could live on it. And maybe just starting with adding at least one small dadude unit on this property for the sake of being communal. That's where we are now. I listen. I done created a whole pathway to it, which includes I have friends who are my uncle, for example, is a master plumber, and I'm just like I also think that kids are bored and they need. I'm watching my son right now in online courses. I'm like, he needs a hands-on experience.
Mm.
So if I could, here's my thought. You got, you got, young folks who need hands-on experience into these kinds of fields. Like my son is really interested in electrical engineering, right? And building homes is really interesting to him. You got brown folks who need to add value to their properties. And then you got, this is me supporting my community, obviously. It's not that I love all four kinds of folks. I'm just going to say that. But I've just been thinking about this. And then I have, you have these amazing, like my uncle, an amazing master plumber who told me recently, when I became a master plumber, they told me that there's not a lot of people who's going to look like me in this field. But this has been a great field. He said, "This has been a wonderful field for me. And I want to pass this information on to young people so that they can see that even if you don't become a master plumber, knowing these skill sets is never going to hurt you."
Mm.
Right.
Mm.
So what if we were able to bring all of that together and say, yes, this summer, this is really the goal, is this summer is to take some young folks to figure out a way to give them an internship and to take some experts and to build something on this property so we can have some communal living. That's where we're focused at for the next, probably, I think it's a year, but it's not going to be a year. It might be like a 5-year project, because look, the idea is there is the funding, how do you get people to invest in that with us? But that's where we want to go. We're thinking communal these days.
I love it. I love that vision. And it's clear how even the influence from your grandparents and all those kids and the work that they did to help out their community, those marginalized, to help human beings flourish. It's evident in your story, and I think admirable for the rest of us that maybe don't take the time to listen as carefully as you have throughout your journey, which is pretty amazing. So any final words for the entrepreneurs, investors, those curious about even just how to listen better to their markets and communities that they are engaged with? Any final words for us?
That's a good question. I think just keep asking. I think it's so important to keep remaining open to ask and not assume. And I say that I'm learning that with my own kids, right? Again, coming back to learning through whatever is in front of you. But I think it's so important that we don't ever assume that we know, that we always, and maybe the practice is just questions, right? Keep asking questions around. So that's the best way to me to be a listener. An active listener is a person who continues to ask.
That's great. Well, appreciate your time. How can people who might be interested in reaching out to you, how can they best find you?
Oh yeah, I'm just an old school girl in that way. Like, I have no website, no way you can look me up on Facebook if you want, but I don't check it all the time. But really the best way to probably reach me is email, which is foxyandjason@q, just the letter q.com. It's the best place to reach me. Yeah.
Awesome.
And love to chat. If people are really just trying to be communal and trying to listen in, and you just need support in that, just give us an email. Yeah.
Appreciate that a lot. Thank you, Foxy.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Will, for all you're doing, and appreciate you.
All right, a couple quick things before you go. Number one, I have a general newsletter where I write about technology and startups and health science and teaching people to code. And I write about a variety of different subjects that we talk about on this show. So if you go to wclittle.com, there you'll be able to subscribe, and you'll also be able to subscribe to particular topics. If you're just interested in one or a few of them, you'll be notified right when I publish new content in those areas. Number two, my partners and I at Proto Ventures have a portfolio company called Startup Rocket. If you go to startuprocket.com, there you'll be able to receive coaching guides and customize an operations framework for you and your team and your advisors to be on the same page in terms of what is the appropriate next step for you and your entrepreneurial journey. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review anywhere that you have listened to this podcast or watched this podcast, it would be super helpful to help those who might be interested in consuming this content as well. Thank you.